Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows we watch so that you don't have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. Please like the stream so that more people can see it. More people get to have the benefit of listening to the smooth tones of, Jake Tapper, Dana Bash, all your favorites,
All your faves.
all your favorite talking heads. Lindsey Graham, we got a lot of him today.
Oh, yeah.
So like and share the stream. And thanks for being here. Also, go to usefulidiotspodcast.com, which is our website, to support the show, get bonus content, and keep us going.
Yeah. We got Thursday Throwdown for you, which is your midweek dose of media madness. So if you like this, you're going to love our Thursday Throwdown feature and extended interviews. There's really nothing more that you could ask for in this world.
Well, if you were asking for a thrilling couple hours of television, you're in luck, because later this week, Donald J. Trump and Joe Biden are meeting up for their first debate of this campaign season. And we all remember how fun it was last time. And so naturally, the Sunday shows are giddy about this upcoming historic matchup. And we're going to have a preview today, I guess, on the show. So let's start off with Meet the Press.
And check out either, I don't know if I'm going to be able to convince Aaron to do a live stream of the debate. Probably not.
No,
but
the answer is
okay,
no.
you're not. Okay, the answer is no. So I'll probably do one. So check out the Katie Halper Show, youtube.com/the Katie Halper Show. I'll probably do one. All right. So let's start with Meet the Press.
Morning, I'm Peter Alexander. Good Sunday morning. I'm Peter Alexander, in for Kristen Welker. It has been more than 1,300 days since the last debate between President Biden and former President Trump, the last time either man appeared on a debate stage. In 4 days, they will face off again in the earliest general election debate in history, and what may be the most consequential face-to-face in decades. The two candidates and their allies have signaled that they will attempt to portray each other in the most negative light possible, casting Mr. Trump as an unhinged felon and President Biden as not physically or mentally equipped to serve another term.
Crooked Joe's gone to a log cabin to study, prepare. No, he didn't. He's sleeping now because they want to get him good and strong.
All right. Now, I'm a little concerned about Trump's mental acuity, because isn't it Crooked Hillary and Sleepy Joe? He just called him Crooked Biden.
I think he updated
he did.
the crooked moniker for Biden too in 2020. I believe he said we're going to call Biden crooked too.
Okay, I missed that. So thank you. Sorry for Trump for smearing you on in a way that was totally unwarranted. I'm the idiot. Okay.
So a little before debate time, he gets a shot in the ass.
The things he said are off the wall. I want to be a dictator on day one. I want to move in a direction where he talks about, suspending the Constitution. All I have to do is hear what he says, remind people what he says and what I believe and what he believes.
The stakes are...
here's a moment where we can have some unity, I think. The anchor here talks about the campaign's messaging about the other candidates. So Trump wants to paint Biden as not mentally fit and physically fit for the job, and Biden wants to paint Trump as being an unhinged felon. Hey, there's truth to both. Both sides.
Both sides, yeah.
We can really see the merit in both sides here, and there's something kind of nice about that. Amid all
truth
this,
to both. I like that. That could, that could be like the moniker for this for the presidential campaign. Truth to both, but mostly lies.
High. More than 73 million people tuned into the first Biden-Trump debate in 2020. And President Biden is spending the weekend at Camp David, hunkering down in formal debate prep. The president's personal lawyer, Bob Bauer, is playing the role of Mr. Trump, reprising his role from
I think the key term there is hunkering down. He's definitely hunkering down. He's not really moving because he can't walk around too much. And he doesn't really have much to say. He's being spoon-fed lines by his advisors. And I'm sure that's a really riveting process. I wish we could see like a Rocky-style montage of Biden getting ready for the debate.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. It would just be one shot, though. He'd be doing the same thing the whole time, right?
Yeah, he'd be sitting there like blankly staring ahead and being told what to say.
Yeah.
2020. Mr. Trump was on the campaign trail on Saturday. Aides say that he's going to spend time this week meeting privately with advisors at his Florida estate as part of a more informal debate prep process.
Yeah, informal because he doesn't do any preparation.
Right.
He doesn't listen to anybody. Like whatever they'll tell him, it will go in one ear and out the other. He won't even acknowledge it because, you know, on top of being very braggadocious and cocky and just confident in himself, he also just doesn't have an attention span. So his prep is just basically listening to himself talk.
Yeah, he does. He really does shoot from the hip.
President Biden in closed-door fundraisers and on the trail has previewed what will be one of his key debate messages, that Mr. Trump is now a greater threat to the country than during his time in office.
The threat that Trump poses is greater in his second term than his first. It's clear that when he lost in 2020, something literally snapped in the sky. Now he's running again, and he's clearly unhinged.
Trump ally.
You know, I don't think this messaging is going to land. I just really don't. They tried to make it about Trump every single time.
Yeah.
In 2020, I think it worked because of COVID, because, you know, a lot of people blame Trump for COVID. And that race was very close. You know, Biden should have ran away with it, but he didn't. And of course, when Trump was a president, the whole point was that he was a Russian agent. So he was like a traitor to the country, and he was a dictator. And now Biden's trying to say, no, look, it's even worse than it was last time. Trust me. Like it's even worse than last time.
It's hard to believe. I mean, when they say it's unprecedented each time, it's hard to believe it because it was supposed to be unprecedented the last time.
Yeah. And again, you know, they want to call him a threat to democracy because of the January 6th riot. Well, if a 3-hour riot is an existential threat to democracy, it's a pretty brittle democracy. Trump, whatever you want to say about him, he didn't try to I don't know. He didn't try to get an actual coup would have been activated in the military. That would have been that's how coups work. You know, that's, for example, the coup that the U.S. supported in Ukraine, which was like they got people to fire on people. They committed actual violence. They seized weapons from government armories. Like that's an actual insurrection, which the Biden team totally backed. That's an actual coup. What Trump did, whatever you want to say about it, it was unhinged. It was criminal. Don't think it was a coup.
Yeah, doesn't Max refer to it as a low IQ riot?
A low IQ riot by the Ku Klux Klans. That's what that's how he describes it. Yes, that's Max Blumenthal. Okay.
The former president to focus on President Biden's record and some of his own plans, instead of venting about the legal cases against him and repeating false claims of election fraud. President Biden's team expects aggressive attacks on the president's record on immigration and the economy in particular. Tomorrow marks the 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. And both the president and vice president are making the fight to protect reproductive rights central to their campaign.
So, you know, this is smart. This is an actual issue.
Yeah.
And this is where the Republicans are just off the charts extremists. And so, yeah, this is where I think they have a chance because the Republican position is so extreme. That's what I would do if I were them. I would keep honing that one.
Right. Actual substance, something that actually makes has a real impact on people's material lives.
Yeah. It's one of the few cases.
Of course, Biden's a hypocrite because the Democrats didn't codify Roe v. Wade when they could have, but he's still, in terms of messaging, far less. I mean, he's not an extremist the way that Trump is. And the funny thing is, Trump doesn't care about abortion. Like, he couldn't care less about it. This is all political opportunism.
Yeah, throughout his personal life, he was extremely pro-abortion. Yeah. But then when he started running as a Republican, he had to pretend that he cared about the Bible and the sanctity of life and all that stuff, which is the last thing he cares about. And this, by the way, is one of the few areas where there's any difference between Biden and Trump. On foreign policy, they're identical. There's no difference at all. People like to think that Trump is like against the deep state and he's going to stop the war in Ukraine when really, substantively, he's offered nothing to differ from Biden's policy. Trump's policies actually help contribute to the war in Ukraine. So, and same with, of course, Israel and Palestine. They're both completely devoted to funneling Israel's war machine, fueling Israel's war machine and funneling it with weapons. And they both are basically take orders from major Zionist donors, like, you know, Haim Saban in the case of Biden, and Miriam Adelson in the case of Trump, who just promised $100 million for a Trump super PAC.
And that's, of course, Sheldon Adelson, RIP, Sheldon Adelson's widow.
I think that the debate is going to make clear the contrast between our president, the current president, who works on behalf of the American people, fights for the American people, and the former president who pretty much spends full time fighting for himself.
Mr. Trump's vice presidential shortlist has gotten even shorter. In interviews with NBC News, more than a dozen sources wired into the process tell us that North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance are now emerging as the top finalists. Florida Senator Marco Rubio remains in contention, but those sources say there are doubts about Rubio's enthusiasm for the job. Both Burgum and Vance were asked.
I mean,
that's fair.
Sorry. It is fair, yeah. Also, Trump did say that Rubio couldn't win dog catcher, couldn't win an election as dog catcher. So I feel like he probably doesn't want to have him on his team.
Yeah, and he called him Little Marco.
Right.
Who's going to want to take a job as being the as being the second in command to a guy who's made fun of your height? I'll tell you this right now: anybody who makes fun of my height, I will not be working with you. Okay, I will not be your VP. Katie, if you make fun of my height, that's it. I'm out. I'll quit on the air.
Aaron is speaking. You are giving voice to short kings around the world.
Exactly. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. So Marco, stand up to Trump. Don't take the job. Do it for short
Literally
kings
stand
everywhere.
up. Yeah. Stand up tall. As tall as you can.
Whether they want to be VP.
When he makes that decision, it's solely up to him, and he's the guy that controls the criteria. There's never been a better politician, a better debater, a better communicator.
I think that's ultimately that's Donald Trump's choice, whether he selects me as vice president. I feel very comfortable with the fact that I could do the job. But look, you have to have some humility going into this, too.
And on Saturday, NBC News asked Mr. Trump whether his vice presidential pick will come to Thursday's debate.
Most likely, yeah. He'll be there.
Have you decided who your vice president is?
In my mind, yeah.
Do they know?
No, nobody knows.
Nobody knows. It's going to be a surprise. He's going to call them the day of. Yeah. And by the way, I just returning to the short king issue. Representation is important. So if Marco were his Veep, that would be historic. Short kings everywhere would know that they too could become vice presidents.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, not that there haven't been short leaders before. Napoleon's a famous one.
Although apparently Napoleon wasn't that short for his time. Have you heard that?
I have not heard that. It's fascinating. Useful Idiots, we bring you breaking news, political affairs, and fascinating historical anecdotes, such as Napoleon's shortness was overhyped. Fascinating.
Overhyped, yeah.
All right. Let's turn to
our
Useful Idiots fan favorite. We love to see him every single week. Lindsey Graham. He is excited because Benjamin Netanyahu, one of his best friends, someone he admires a lot, talks to all the time apparently, is coming to the U.S. very soon to give a speech to Congress, because why not? Why not reward this mass murderer with a address before Congress, which is a very rare honor that is only bestowed to very special people. And Netanyahu, as a reliable U.S. client, and even someone who's willing to throw his own sponsor under the bus, as he just did this week when he attacked Biden for pausing one weapon shipment, literally one weapon shipment. Netanyahu is going to get that honor of coming to Congress. So Lindsey Graham is here to talk about the latest in Gaza.
Let's talk about foreign policy, because there's a lot brewing between the White House and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. Ahead of his speech coming here on Capitol Hill, Politico reports this. The headline, no one knows what he's going to say. White House fears are mounting about his visit. Senator Chris Murphy said he's only about himself, and they're worried that he's going to come here and criticize our American president for not supporting them enough. They've been very public about that. Should you welcome a foreign leader to come speak on the floor in the House when you know possibly they're going to go after our sitting president?
This is just not a foreign leader. It is the leader of Israel, our best friend in the region, one of our best friends in the world. Israel is surrounded by Islamic extremists who want to cut their throats literally.
Really important when you're talking about world affairs to think about it in sort of grade school terms. You know, who's my best friend? Who's my kind of friend? You know, who's my enemy? but really important to speak about geopolitical affairs this way in terms of like who's your best friend. Really, really sophisticated there. And why not have a best friend who commits mass slaughter and endangers everybody and is nuclear armed and is an ethno supremacist state, fronted by people who don't even mind humiliating the president, who's going out of his way to arm them to the teeth, because
So
why not? That's
embarrassing.
what best friends do.
Right. Well, Aaron, you kind of had some um what was your experience in classroom politics, because you had a stone throwing rock throwing experience?
I was a member of the Rock Stoppers. Yes, I've told this story before. Yes, I don't really see the relevance to this one here,
Well,
but and unless you can find the link, but
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
what rock stoppers, what did you do? You stopped rock throwers before they
Well, the
actually,
Rock
yeah.
Stoppers was sort of it was a metaphor. It's more for me a metaphor for NATO, in that like
Okay.
we heard a rumor in the schoolyard that people were throwing rocks, so we formed something called the Rock Stoppers, right? Which is like a defense of the school against the against the rock throwers, even though we actually didn't
Right.
even know whether they existed. And we ended up going around and trying to look for people who were throwing rocks, but there weren't any. So we ended up in trying to like justify our existence. We ended up coming up with like techniques for stopping rocks, and that entailed throwing rocks at the
Right.
imaginary rocks that were being thrown. So basically, we
Right.
created our own threat. We
Yeah.
created the rock throwers by being the rock stoppers, and
Right.
sort of my metaphor for NATO. I guess you can apply that to Israel too. It creates threats
Well,
because of its own aggression. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
I
that
got
that
you.
too, but actually where I was going with that was that you were making fun of Lindsey Graham for having kind of like grade school based politics, right? Our
Mm,
bestie determines our politics, and you
sure.
yourself were kind of a trailblazer in terms of grade school politics, because you yourself kind of um recreated NATO at your school.
Yeah. What we also did, me and my classmates in grade 5, is we led an uprising against a authoritarian teacher who was like who would like separate us and like separate the class from good kids and bad kids, and he would call us names, and we literally had an uprising and we won. So I've been leading rebellions from a very young age, and perhaps I
Wow.
can write a memoir one day about how my school experiences influenced my politics. Who knows?
Yeah. And would you
Stick me
remember,
into
you're
that.
gonna have to find out the date of that rebellion so you can call it, Feb 2,
Mm-hmm.
Feb 2nd, like the J6 of Aaron Mate's life. Wow.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, back to Lindsay.
And here's what you need to understand. All those people that want to kill Israel want to kill you, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. So I will welcome him here. Here's what bothers me the most. Slow walking weapons to Israel makes the war go on longer. We need to be all in helping Israel, give them the weapons they need to win a war they can't afford to lose. Hamas says they'll keep doing it again and again and again until they destroy it. I believe Hamas. The great Satan's Iran, who's activating Hezbollah. So the administration's tried to use weapons in Ukraine and Israel to micromanage wars. They've tried to give Ukraine just enough to stay in the fight, not to win. They've been slow on artillery, slow on F-16, slow on tanks. Now they're slow with Israel. But I got a call just a few minutes ago.
Just before we hear more, like, note how the question was about, hey, should we be welcoming Netanyahu to Congress? Like,
Yeah.
that's the question. But Lindsay is such a warmonger that he can't just give a direct answer to the question. Everything has to turn into this unhinged rant about how we have to arm everyone to the teeth, fuel war everywhere. All these bad guys want to kill us. We have to destroy everybody, which means in real life, slaughter civilians on a industrial scale, because that's what Israel's doing inside Gaza. And now he's pivoted somehow to Ukraine, and he's mad that Biden hasn't given Ukraine enough weapons to go and fuel that proxy war. So
I mean,
it's just,
it's all about
it's a
the slow
fascinating character.
walking.
Sorry, say it again.
It's all about the slow walking of weapons. That's
Yeah.
the thread. Because
Yes.
I mean, we should point out slow walking, Aaron, as you know, is pausing sending one single shipment of 2,000-pound bombs.
Yeah, literally, that's what the complaint is about when it comes to Lindsey Graham and Netanyahu. They paused one weapon shipment of 2,000-pound bombs. Pause it. They didn't even say they were canceling it, because
Right.
you can't cancel a weapon shipment to Israel. They just said we're pausing it. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, was like so upset that Netanyahu was critical. She's like, please, we're sending you all the weapons. We just paused this one thing. Don't be mad at us. And for Lindsey Graham and Netanyahu, of course, even that one symbolic pause is not enough.
It's treason. It's not how you treat your bestie.
No, it's not.
Israelis see some progress, but I promise you this, when we come back, there will be oversight on the weapons delivery systems to Israel. Congress has voted in a bipartisan way to give Israel the bombs and the missiles they need to win a war they can't afford to lose. And we will be looking over Biden's shoulder to see if he's honoring the commitments made by Congress. The fact we're having this debate emboldens Hamas. The fact that we will not sanction the international.
Okay, two amazing things there. First of all, the fact that we're even having a debate emboldens Hamas. So rather than like even discuss whether to arm an ethno-supremacist mass murdering state to the teeth, you can't even do that because that's going to help Hamas. So sorry, no debate. Can't even discuss it. Yeah, everyone shut your mouth. And then he says we're going to have oversight. So when you think about oversight, like of like a country that's committing war crimes, you think, oh, maybe we're going to have some oversight to stop the war crimes and determine how many war crimes are being committed. He's saying we're going to have oversight to make sure that the war criminal state is getting armed enough.
Right.
That's his oversight.
There's no delay whatsoever.
National Criminal Court for charging the Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister as war criminals is outrageous. Every time Biden does this, it juices up the terrorists. They see this as a separation between Israel and the United States, and it makes the war go on longer, and it's aiding and abetting the enemy even though they don't want to.
Keep us updated on those phone calls, Senator. Good to see you.
I will.
Thanks for coming with us live.
You know, there are a couple interesting things that Lindsay said. First of all, I like the way he called Iran the great Satan. Sounds like a fundamentalist preacher. But the other thing he said is that he believes Hamas. I don't know if viewers noticed that. He said, I believe Hamas. I mean, does he believe Hamas when they say that they are not bent on the extermination of Jews, which is something that he claims that they are? Does he believe their charter where they very deliberately distinguish between Jews with whom they have no problem and Zionist occupiers? Because I haven't heard him honoring that distinction.
Yeah, no, certainly not. He just goes by this caricature of Hamas and of all Palestinians. You know, he says they all want to slit your throats. Right. Hezbollah, Iran, Hamas. No, they just don't want to be occupied. It's not a hard concept. Yeah. Really not a hard concept.
All right, let's see. So next, we got Robert O'Brien, right? And this is Trump's former national security advisor.
These countries are relying on Russian energy for these countries are relying on Russian energy to run their economies. We need to increase our energy production. We need to sanction the Russian Federation Central Bank, which Larry Kudlow and I called upon the president to do before the invasion of Ukraine, and start cutting back on Russian oil sales. Keep in mind, Margaret, we're the first administration to give lethal aid to the Ukrainians. The Javelin missiles, which stopped the Russian invasion to start with. And I give the Biden administration credit for getting them some aid afterwards. But it was all.
It's so, what a world we live in when someone brags about sending lethal aid.
Yeah, that's what they call it, lethal aid, in the form of like Javelin missiles. That is now called aid in this country.
I mean, others would call it weapons, but we call it lethal aid. Sorry about that. I put on my do not disturb.
It's too little, too late. We need to bring Vladimir Putin to the table, and the way to do that is what Larry Kudlow and I called for, and what President Trump has called for, is to put massive sanctions on the Russians to bring Putin to the table so we can have a negotiated peace treaty. We've got to stop the killing in Ukraine. We've got to stop the killing of Ukrainians. We've got to stop the killing of Russians. Yeah. And we need peace in the world. And our weakness, this too little, too late, telling the Ukrainians they can have some weapons, but they can't have others. Yeah. They can use some weapons, but they can't use others. The half-measure sanctions. None of that's helping in the war in Ukraine. It's a lack of leadership under the Biden administration. Trump will get this war settled very quickly.
First of all, I just want to say, not a very compelling speaker, this Robert O'Brien.
No.
Not the most compelling speaker in Trump's camp. I think he can do better. But also, again, the same theme of Lindsey Graham, where the criticism of Biden from his opponents is not that he's like fueled so much carnage around the world in both Ukraine and Gaza and other places too, but especially in those two locations. It's that he's not fueling the carnage enough. He's not giving enough weapons. And he brags about how the Trump administration, we gave Ukraine all these weapons. We slapped on sanctions. And that's his big plan for ending the war in Ukraine. It's not like have a negotiation, have diplomacy. It's we're going to arm Ukraine more. We're going to impose more sanctions on Russia. That's like That's the opposition we're getting to Biden. Biden, one of the biggest warmongers in U.S. history, his opponent, or at least his opponent's aides and top spokespeople are saying that Biden is not being enough of a warmonger. That's the system we're in. And by the way, there's been a really important development recently. Vladimir Putin recently, as we talked about on last week's show with Ian Proud, a British diplomat, he put out an offer for peace. Rather than try to at least discuss that with him, the Biden administration said, no, it's an act of surrender, and so therefore there won't be any talks. And then meanwhile, the New York Times finally acknowledged for the first time that there was like a lot of progress made weeks into the war in Turkey when Russia and Ukraine almost reached a peace deal. And the Times even published draft treaties, and it shows how far they got. Like all these details were worked out. And then we know what happened, which the Times doesn't mention because they're not ready to acknowledge this yet. But Boris Johnson came to Kyiv and told Zelensky that we're not going to back you up if you make peace with Russia, and you should keep fighting them. And meanwhile, also the U.S. and U.K. critically, and again, the Times doesn't acknowledge this either, refused to offer Ukraine security guarantees, which it would need to make a peace with Russia. And so that was more than 2 years ago. Finally, more than 2 years later, we get an acknowledgement in the New York Times that all this happened. But the fact that it was so close to being finalized shows that, if we wanted to, rather than blocking it this time, we could try that again. But again, the Biden administration is not interested in diplomacy. They only want to keep using Ukraine for their failed goal of weakening Russia.
Right. They care about bleeding Russia. And that, of course, means literal bleeding on the part of Ukrainians. And luckily, though, our show has been talking about this way before the New York Times, which is another reason that you should like this show. And I hope you enjoyed this seamless transition. But I'm looking, and we got 793 likes, and we got 2,265 people watching. I mean, this should be we should be at least half, which should be 11,000. So let's see. I'm going to need some increased likes, guys. I think we should make it to 1,000. If you are watching, not liking, you are part of the problem. You are not part of the solution. Let's see where we're at now. I'm going to do a little screen refresh. We're at 906. That's pretty good. Let's get it up. Do I have 1,000? Let's see 1,000. If you've already liked, don't like again because that cancels it out. I mean, I don't know what else to say except it's your duty, guys. We watch these shows. The least you could do is give us a thumbs up. And we're at 1K. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Back to the clip. We got another clip, right?
Oh yeah, we do. But by the way, I would support if YouTube, if you're listening, I would support a hate watch button. I think that'd be fascinating. How many people are hate watching? Let's hear you. Why not acknowledge the hate watchers?
Right. I mean, they used to let you do a thumbs down, but
yeah,
I don't want them to do that because actually I think that harms our numbers. But what we do need from you guys is a thumbs up. Thank you so much.
Katie, I've ever told you my motto in life. My motto in life is hate is great. Hate is great. It is. Yeah, because I say that to myself whenever I get like hate mail or some nasty comment or whatever. I say to myself, hate is great. Hate is great.
You know what my favorite thing is when haters rate about how irrelevant you are. I mean, not just you, Aaron, whether it's to me or you or whomever. Like, yeah, then why are you writing about me or writing to me if I'm irrelevant?
Bam. Hate watchers' minds were just blown. It's a great point.
It is a great point, yeah. All right, so let's see. Shifting. We have another Robert O'Brien clip.
Yes, and this shows just again the genius that Trump surrounds himself with. Because Robert O'Brien, who is his national security advisor, wrote an article recently, basically wanting to deploy U.S. Marines pretty much entirely to the Asia Pacific region. Because why not? And here he is being asked about that.
When you were last with us, you said that you would be honored to serve with Mr. Trump again, and you laid out in this essay in Foreign Affairs what you think a second Trump term would look like. So I want to get to that. Recently, in some interviews, Mr. Trump has refused to say what he would do if China invaded Taiwan. I wonder if you would advise him to have U.S. military forces defend it.
Well, I think that's always been the policy of the American government. It's called strategic ambiguity, and we don't tell the Chinese how we're going to react to their actions. But the key thing, Margaret, is peace through strength. If we have a strong Navy If we move our soldiers and Marines out of Europe and Germany where they're garrisoned and put them in Guam and Hawaii and the Philippines, Australia where we have Marines already, that sends a strong message to the Chinese not to invade. The key is to deter war, not to fight and win a war, which we need to do if it happens, but we need to deter the Chinese and the Communist Party from invading Taiwan in the first place, which we failed to do with Russia and Ukraine. And so strength will deter the Chinese from invading. It's not talk, it's how they see our force posture.
So, well, the largest contingent of all overseas U.S. military forces is in East Asia and the Pacific already. You're calling to send the entire Marine Corps to Asia. When Mr. Trump was president, sorry, go ahead.
The fighting force, the Marine Corps, we'll still have Pendleton and Camp Lejeune and the logistics tail, but like World War II, when Asia was key for us, we should have the Marines in Asia, we should have the Air Force and the Army and parts of the Navy in Europe and the rest of the world, but the Marines are perfectly suited for the Indo-Pacific.
Important clarification, okay? Just the fighting force of the Marines in Asia, okay? Not all the Marines, just the fighting ones, okay? Just the fighting ones. Because for some reason, this current moment is analogous to World War II.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just recreate that whole thing and see what happens.
Well, I mean, they do have spy balloons, Aaron.
They do have spy balloons. That's right. That's right. The weather balloon. God, that was a crazy moment. We had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
The panic.
No, keep going.
It was literally a weather balloon, and it triggered a multi-day meltdown. That was so funny. God.
And it really is like Pearl Harbor.
Yes. Okay, well, that's enough of Robert O'Brien, as compelling a speaker as he is. Let's turn to another compelling speaker. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morrell, one of the biggest warmongers in public life. Just he's the guy who said he wanted to fuel the proxy war in Syria in order to kill Russians. That's one of his famous lines. Really stable person. But he's also, of course, because he used to work for the CIA and because he's a warmonger, he's naturally a so-called national security analyst for CBS News. So here he is talking about the threat of terrorism.
You just had that Foreign Affairs article that got all this attention, the terrorism warning light.
By the way, is Face the Nation sponsored by Foreign Affairs? They have two guests on to pitch their to plug their recent pieces in Foreign Affairs. Just wondering.
You just had that Foreign Affairs article that got all this attention. The terrorism warning lights are blinking red again. You compared the moment we are in now to what happened in the lead up to 9/11. And I want to play something FBI Director Chris Wray said earlier this month.
Our most immediate concern has been that individuals or small groups will draw twisted inspiration from the events in the Middle East to carry out attacks here at home. But now, on top of that, increasingly concerning is the potential for a coordinated attack here in the homeland, not unlike the ISIS-K attack we saw at the Russia Concert Hall back in March.
That's chilling. The White House says the president is briefed regularly on threats. If that is true, do you think he's doing enough?
Hard for me to say whether he's doing enough because a lot of what needs to be done we wouldn't see publicly. What I would say is I ran into a lot of current intelligence officers and current policymakers after we published the article. The response was almost universal in, we're glad you wrote this, it's really important. I read that as maybe there's a lack of a sense of urgency here, and that's really important.
A lack of sense of urgency among members of the public or the government?
The administration, yeah. And Congress, quite frankly. There needs to be a sense of urgency about this. And I think the American public needs to understand what the threat is. That's why we called for a public congressional hearing just on the terrorist threats to the homeland, right? Not a hearing on threats broadly, but threats to the homeland. And then we need to hear what the administration is doing about this in a broad sense, right? Not the details, but in a broad sense.
Okay, so we can't tell you what the threat is. We can't give you any details, but there's a threat, everybody. So please be scared. And this is the playbook we've been hearing for more than 2 decades since 9/11. Remember the color codes of the
Oh
threat to the
yeah, those are
homeland.
great.
Michael Morell's a veteran at that. And in fact, speaking of 9/11, there's some new revelations on that, which he was asked about. So let's skip ahead to that clip, Wilson.
Well,
It's number
before we
13.
before we do that though, I just want to show something. Let's show a screenshot of the Foreign Affairs article that Morell wrote because I think it's something really interesting about it. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so I won't read the whole thing. I'm just going to read some of the relevant parts. Motives abound for potential perpetrators of terrorist attacks. 2 decades of war in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as U.S. drone strikes in more than a dozen other countries, have generated resentment towards the United States that could drive individuals to seek violent retribution. More recently, Israel's ongoing response to the horrific attacks on October 7th has killed at least 36,000 people, of which more than half are civilians. It's actually more than that, obviously, in Gaza. That operation will have what Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines has called a generational impact on terrorism and will create what Kurilla has described as the conditions for malign actors to sow instability throughout the region and beyond. So it's so interesting because one could take away from all of that, oh, look, if we care about safety and not being victims of terrorist attacks, why don't we actually change the policy and not do stuff like that? So not occupy countries like Afghanistan, invade and then occupy them, not support a genocide happening right now. But no, he doesn't care about that. He just wants us to be on the lookout for the terrorism that we, through our actions, are, according to him, provoking.
No can do when it comes to changing policies. Got to keep those going and therefore fuel threats to everybody around the world and then fearmonger the U.S. public into paying more for the very same policies that create the threats to begin with. It's a wonderful system. Works really well.
Yeah, it does work well. And I want to give a shout out to Know Your Meme who tweeted that screenshot out at Twitter. No, that was not the person who did it. Wilson, where's that tweet come from? When I said show this. Okay, Hong Pong on Twitter. Okay.
Well, Michael Morell, having worked at the CIA for a long time, he knows about blowback because the CIA, of course, propped up in Afghanistan the same people that became Al Qaeda and attacked the U.S. in 9/11. And then after 9/11, 10 years later, decided it'd be a good idea that even though Al Qaeda attacked the U.S., that the U.S. should support Al Qaeda in Syria because that was who was dominating the insurgency that the CIA was arming with Michael Morell's support. But now there's been new revelations about 9/11 and the role of Saudi operatives and questions about what the CIA, including Mike Morell, knew. So he was asked about this.
Ask you about some video that CBS broadcast earlier this week. 60 Minutes obtained it. It's Saudi national Omar al-Bayoumi walking around the U.S. Capitol back in 1999. We're seeing that video now. It was shot within 90 days of the time when senior al-Qaeda planners were deciding on 9/11 targets, according to the FBI. At the time, you were at the CIA. We know now the FBI identified this man, al-Bayoumi, as an intelligence operative with close ties to 2 of the 9/11 hijackers. But in that 9/11 Commission report, it said there was no credible evidence that he was a violent extremist or aided extremist. Now that you have seen this video, what do you think it reveals?
No doubt in my mind that it is a casing video, for some sort of terrorist attack, number one. Number two, pretty clear to me that al-Bayoumi was either working for Al-Qaeda or was Al-Qaeda. Did he know about the 9/11 attacks? Probably not. Did he know that the 2 individuals he was interacting with were 9/11 hijackers? Probably not. But no doubt in my mind that Al-Qaeda tasked him to do this casing video. The video is chilling. It's chilling in terms of what he was videotaping, his narration over the top of it, which is part what tells you it was a casing video, and his extremist comments. Let me just give you two examples, Margaret. On the casing part, at one point he says, "I will get over there." He's looking at the Washington Monument. "I will get over there and I will report. I will report to you in detail what is there." He's talking to somebody, right? And he talks about a plan.
Not like a tourist would.
Not like a tourist video. And then in terms of the extremism, he's looking at the Capitol and he says, "They say that our kids are demons. However, these are the demons," what he's looking at.
So the FBI concluded he was not a threat. The 9/11 Commission report concluded
So wait, maybe he was just demon watching.
he was not a threat. You're saying it's clear he was al-Qaeda and living under the noses and examination of law enforcement undetected. He's now living in Saudi Arabia as we speak. That's a pretty big oversight by U.S. law enforcement and intelligence. Did the CIA know about this video?
We did not. You know, I'm 99.9% confident that we did not have this video. I was the president's briefer at the time. If somebody had shown me this video, I would have shown it to the president.
It was, as I understand it, UK officials, UK intelligence that scooped up.
Yes.
You know, and the other thing here is the FBI was aware of some of this, but apparently didn't pass this on and actually stopped more attempts to look into this. I think that's the story here. And it's interesting, you know, there's all these questions about Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11. Obviously, the majority of the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, and the Bush administration's failure to follow any of these leads. But this is just more evidence that, you know, of how inept the national security state is in stopping threats, and also how, you know, their own allies fuel threats. And this Saudi operative who filmed this video, he picked up two of the hijackers from an airport after they went to an Al-Qaeda training camp. And those two hijackers were apparently, according to the Gray Zone, the CIA tried to recruit them. So it's just, you know.
And it's not just ineptitude, Aaron, because, you know, and Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 9/11 documents this well, but the Bush like flew out members of the Saudi family right away. They wanted I don't remember who, but there was a demand to question them, and what they did was help them leave the country.
Yeah. So anyway, why we defer to these people who have not only fueled threats around the world, as Michael Morell admits, but also failed to stop them. It's a good question, but we can be sure to be seeing a lot more people like Michael Morell on TV pretending to be experts. All right. Well, speaking of experts, Congressmember Ronnie Jackson, he is a former White House physician, right? He was Trump's personal physician and gave Trump a very clean bill of health. Well, now Ronnie Jackson is turning his attention to Joe Biden. And before the debate, Ronnie Jackson has a very specific demand.
But I want to tell people something about Ronnie Jackson, because he's a fascinating figure. He's a Republican congressman from Texas. He was not just actually Trump's physician, White House physician, but also Obama's. He was also a rear admiral lower half, such funny words, but he was demoted to captain after a Department of Defense Office of Inspector General report found that he made inappropriate comments to subordinates. And I'm just going to read from CBS. Here's what they write. According to the report, during a presidential trip to Manila in 2014, Jackson was accused of making inappropriate comments about a female subordinate and then knocking on her hotel room door while drunk in the middle of the night saying, "I need you." Another subordinate walked by to ask what he was doing, and Jackson allegedly led both subordinates to his room to take photos of himself eating local street food. So this is a guy who has some kind of local street food fetish.
Among other things, yes. Well, Ronnie Jackson, let's hear what he has to say about Joe Biden's acuity.
Embarrassing. And it's really embarrassing as a former White House physician to have to do something like this, but we don't have any choice based on what's going on. But I'm going to be demanding on behalf of many millions of concerned Americans right now that he submit to a drug test before and after this debate, specifically looking for performance-enhancing drugs, because we've seen recently in his State of the Union address that there was a Joe Biden that came out that was not similar at all to what we see on a day-to-day basis for the last 3.5 years. And there's just really no way to explain that other than he was on something, that they'd given him medications. I feel like this is probably what's going on over this week at Camp David. He's going to be at Camp David for a full week before the debate. Part of that is probably experimenting with, just getting the doses just right, because, they have to treat his cognition. They have to give him something to help him think straighter. They have to give him something to wake him up, for his alertness. And then, he's been agitated. We see that all the time, and that's a common symptom or sign of this cognitive disorder that he seems to be suffering from. And so they're probably going to.
Shots fired. Joe Biden.
Shots fired and shots injected.
Well, that's the question. And will Biden submit to a drug test? That would be unprecedented. A presidential debate demanding tests for performance-enhancing drugs to see what's in the system. Like this is like an Olympics race.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing if Biden does it. And if he comes out clean, then everyone has egg on their face. Ronnie Jackson,
Seriously.
us too. We all make fun of Biden, and we all wonder what's going on with him. So maybe Biden will heed the call.
Let's hope. Well, Ronnie Jackson, very, very entertaining appearance. And we have another entertaining appearance by Kristi Noem on Meet the Press.
So let's talk about the book, having gone through much of it right now. This week, Russian President Vladimir Putin traveled to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un. In the first release of your book, you wrote, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. There was no evidence that meeting happened. So how did it make it into your book, Governor?"
I'm not going to talk about that.
You're not going to talk about how it made it in your book?
I took that line out of my book, and I'm not going to talk about it.
I guess my question is, you wrote the book, though, so why was that line ever in your book if it didn't happen?
I wrote the book, and I hope people will read it. It's a good book about how the American citizen can get involved in their government again, and what they can do, and how the most powerful person in government is them. It's the people who show up, who get engaged, and the stories of what they can do to take this country back, and how Donald Trump's policies work for the American people.
And understood. Then, just to put it to bed once and for all, did you or did you not meet with Kim Jong-un?
I am not going to talk about this.
Wouldn't it be why is that such a difficult one to say publicly?
Because I've taken that line out of the book, and I'm not going to discuss it.
Okay, but I guess the question is because you wrote it in the book, people just wanted to know whether that was an accurate or an inaccurate statement.
I love the message discipline here. She pivots immediately to plugging the book, what it's about, Americans taking their, politics in their own hands, and also seems to think that as long as she took something out of the book, she doesn't have to talk about it. I mean, she did write a version where she talked about meeting with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, and how she stood up to Kim Jong-un, she showed him who's boss or something like that. That her presence was intimidating to Kim Jong-un, and then in real life, of course, that meeting didn't happen. And then rather than just say, I don't know who's advising her, but the advice should be, listen, I used a ghostwriter for some of the book, even though I'm sure it was all of the book, but just say it's and the ghostwriter happened to write that section, and the ghostwriter got it wrong, and so I apologize. It's just throw your ghostwriter under the bus.
Yeah.
But they're not doing that. She just won't talk about it. It's really funny. There's also the controversy of that book passage where she admits to shooting a dog that was harassing her livestock, and everyone's gotten mad at her for that. But
disgusting.
Yeah, but that's what the book is known for: shooting a young dog, like a puppy, and lying about meeting Kim Jong-un. It's a pretty fascinating kickoff for a political memoir.
But you know what? I appreciate that feisty spirit that she claims she brought to Kim Jong-un, although she didn't because she wasn't there. But you see her bringing that feisty spirit to this interview. She refuses. She will not answer that question. She won't back down, just like she wouldn't back down to Kim Jong-un, except she did back down to him because she wasn't there.
The same feisty spirit that she fictitiously brought to meeting
Right.
Kim Jong-un, she's now bringing to questions about her fictional meeting with Kim Jong-un. She won't back down.
Exactly.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Really funny. Well, okay, and apparently she's still on the VP shortlist for Trump. Although this incident might do it. I mean, I don't know. Trump doesn't mind a tall tale, a fib here and there, but this might be even too far for Trump. So we'll see. Okay, well, someone else who's on Trump's shortlist for VP is Doug Burgum.
Oh, wow.
He is the governor. What is it? Minnesota?
North Dakota.
I'm sorry, North Dakota. And he's apparently in the running for Trump's VP pick. As we heard earlier, it's rumored to be down to him and J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio. And so he went on CNN State of the Union with Caitlin Collins.
Ask you about something that you've been saying repeatedly about President Biden. Take a listen to this.
Talk about being a dictatorship. This is what's happening under Biden. Under Joe Biden, we're actually living under a dictatorship today. If you want to find out what it's like to live in a dictatorship, we're living in one now. So we know what it's like under dictatorship, and that dictatorship right now is Joe Biden.
I understand you don't like President Biden's policies on immigration or student loans, but respectfully, I mean, you're calling the democratically elected president a dictator?
Well, we've got three branches.
Okay, respectfully, they also called Trump that when he was democratically
Right.
elected, and they also called him a Russian asset and a traitor. So, I mean, fair enough. I agree. I agree that Biden is not a dictator, but shouldn't like CNN and other liberal outlets like this that bought into the whole Trump mania thing for years and Russiagate, shouldn't there be a little self-reflection there when they ask that
Sure.
question?
And some consistency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's hear what Burgum has to say.
And this president, more like any other, has bypassed Congress because as a governor of a natural resources state, a big ag state, we're facing over 30 rules and mandates. Each one of those could be 800 pages to 1,400 pages long. None of them have come from Congress, and all of them could literally kill the industries that we have in our state, including baseload electricity, which we need to be competitive in the arms race around AI with China, who's building baseload electricity plants like 2 a month. So that's happening without Congress. And then
Okay, so I love this argument. So basically, he's saying it's a dictatorship because he bypassed Congress, Biden, and as an agricultural state, Biden issues orders that affect us, like the creation of electricity for AI to compete with China. So Biden is a dictator because he doesn't let North Dakota produce the electricity needed to compete with China. North Dakota, population 780,000 versus China, 1.43 billion. And the other irony is that, of course, China is successful because it has such a strong central government. And I'm sure Burgum would consider that a dictatorship. All right.
And of course, on the student loan thing, when the Supreme Court ruled against him, then he just said, hey, we'll figure a different way to do it. So I just think that there's, again, a double standard here. He is bypassing the other two branches of government to push an ideological view, whether it's on economics or whether it's on climate extremism. He's doing that without using the other branches. And I think
you don't like his executive orders and you don't like his policies. I understand that. I don't think anyone expects the Republican governor to agree with President Biden on that. But it's not a dictatorship.
Well, I think, again, part of where this word has come from has been there's been a nonstop media attack on President Trump saying that, that he might use executive orders when he takes office. And I'm just was trying to make the point here that under this current administration, most of the changes that are driving inflation in our country, the stuff he's not doing on the border, which he could be doing with executive orders. I mean, the open borders and the inflation.
Okay, this part I like. So he's a dictator because he issues executive orders that Burgum doesn't like, but he's also a dictator because he's not issuing executive orders like on immigration.
Are things that he's doing by himself alone, ignoring the other branches of government.
Well, I counted. Trump signed 220 executive orders when he was in office. President Biden so far has only signed 139, the same time span. And on executive action on immigration, it was Speaker Mike Johnson who was calling on President Biden to take executive action, saying it wasn't Congress's responsibility, it was his.
So anyway, the takeaway here is both parties are totally full of shit and use the word dictator without anything to back it up.
Well, let's hear from some voters. Face the Nation did a focus group to see what's on voters' minds. And yeah, I don't know. Let's hear what they have to say.
Raise your hand if any of you think about, for example, the state of our democracy. Does that concern you? And is that a reason that you would, wow, you are jumping right at it, Marlene. That I didn't even finish the sentence. So what's going on?
Donald Trump does not want what's good for America. He does not want democracy. He wants to have everything his way. He wants to place people in power that will do whatever he says this time. If he wants so and so to be in the Justice Department because they're going to do whatever he says, then he's going to go after all of his political opponents, even if they haven't done anything wrong. He's going to have complete control, and that's what he wants.
So the same can be said about President Biden. He forced all the car manufacturers to convert to EVs, and now they did it because they had no choice. They were going to be penalized if they didn't, and now they're finally pushing back and saying no. There's no sales for these vehicles.
Lydia, do you think somebody's making you buy a car?
Yeah, I'm not buying an EV.
By 2030.
He made it. America has made it mandatory.
All right. The segment is called Listening to America. I'm done with listening to America.
Wait, we just got to listen. We got to listen to Margaret.
Okay,
Sorry, just clarifying this.
Sorry, America.
Americans won't be required to drive electric vehicles. The car manufacturers, there was a goal set for the transition to happen, but Americans won't be required, and car manufacturers will still make combustion engines too.
So I like, again, the takeaway from this clip, much like the takeaway from Burgum's clip, is that democracy is the end of democracy is when voting majorities elect a president who then enacts policies that they campaigned on.
Yes. And the function of the corporate media is basically to set up debates like this, where this so-called debate over democracy and who's a threat to it, it's all done to protect a system that's fundamentally undemocratic, because people and their concerns are marginalized, and decisions are made by corporations, huge lobby groups that control Congress, and no one challenges that fundamental attack on democracy. So then it comes down to the personalities of the two selected candidates of the uniparty, in this case Trump and Biden, who's the bigger threat to democracy. And the whole system is the threat. That's the point here. But that's really fascinating stuff, and we're going to leave it there. But before we go, I want to read a couple of super chats.
Yes, definitely.
This one caught my eye. Okay, Don Zuger donates $2, and thank you, Don.
I mean, we shouldn't even read it.
No, but I just found this. He says, switching to Judge Napolitano with Ray McGovern on now. Why do people feel the need to feel compelled to announce that they're changing the channel? You know what I mean?
Because he's worried that we're going to notice he left.
Don, we're not going to be mad at you if you leave.
Yeah.
We're not going to notice.
We thank you for the $2, but also, actually, it would be more helpful if you didn't, because you're potentially bringing people with you. So instead of paying for the super chat, I mean, I would need you to pay $100 to justify that comment.
That's right. If you're going to change the channel, you have to donate at least $100. And
if
then
you're going to announce it.
Yes.
You're going to announce it. Yeah.
But actually, even if you're not going to announce it, you should actually donate at least $2 before you leave.
No, I would say 50. $50
to leave.
50 to leave, and 100 to leave and announce.
Okay. But I don't mean to slight Judge Napolitano or Ray McGovern. I regularly appear on that channel, and I love Ray McGovern. He's appeared on our show, but I never understood when people feel they need to announce that they're switching the channel. Anyway, okay, and then also wanted to extend our condolences.
A couple more. Okay. You want to do? Yes, this is very important.
I want to extend our condolences to Sonali. My father loved Katie, Aaron, and the show. He's no longer with us after passing on May 31st. May he rest in peace, and may Palestine be liberated from the river to the sea. Sonali, condolences to you and your family, and thank you for that very kind message.
Yes, I'm so sorry about your father. Wanted to also read Martha Allen, who's great. Yes, arrest Netanyahu when he comes. Love and appreciate your journalism and humor, Katie and Aaron. Wade Worth wrote, your Sunday morning sacrifice is much appreciated. Let's see. There was another very generous one that I wanted to read. Sparky, of course, is always great with the comments, so we appreciate all your comments, Sparky. Trump should pick Lieutenant Colonel Alan West as his VP. He can tell Trump when the military-industrial complex and Intel are BSing him. There's a reason the Republican establishment had him gerrymandered out of Congress. Okay, we'll have to look into that. Sparky writes, make Israel Syria again. In those Ottoman Empire days, Levant Jews got along fine with their neighbors, whether Muslim, Christian, or otherwise. Yeah. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And also, again, we really do offer, Sonali, we do offer our condolences to you.
Our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show, keep us going. And thanks for tuning in to Monday morning. We'll see you next time.
See you next week. Bye.